Sajjid, let's put this into perspective. US second half growth slows down. China, presumably people believe the second half would be visibly weak. And if indeed, as you said, right, the countries or companies in the exporting countries could hit profit margins and thereby growth there might get impacted. So a synchronized slowdown of sorts, very likely over the next 6 to 12 months. What's the antidote to this? Would it be monetary policy, a synchronized monetary policy action by central banks across the world? And is something like that even possible in such a disjointed world now?
It's a great question, Neeraj. So I think, as you saw it, second half, we worry about synchronized slowdown. The US is expected to slow. China has begun to slow. For me, the biggest concern is Asia. And I say Asia outside of India. I think about the ASEAN economies, because the first half of this year, they've benefited enormously from front loading. So exports, in ASEAN economies and the rest of Asia until the middle of the year is running at a 20% annualized rate. That's never going to sustain. Why is it running at these rates? Because exporters have been front loading heavily, anticipating tariffs to pick up later in the year. And you've also seen a lot of transshipment that's come from China through ASEAN economies, through Vietnam, through Thailand, to the US. So in a way, the shock has been buffered because of front loading and transshipment. So even if tariffs don't go up from these levels, you will see a sharp slowdown in the second half in the rest of Asia because the front loading is going to unwind and because the US is going to frown on the transshipment. We've seen every letter that's gone out this week has kind of warned countries that if they begin to transship, they'll attract higher tariffs. So you worry about a synchronized slowdown in the second half. Now, what is the policy antidote here? The difficulty in the US is that this is an adverse supply shock. Both tariffs and immigration will hurt growth, but will push up prices. When your effective tariff rate goes from 2.5% to at least 15% and climbing, eventually inflation is going to go up. And so the Fed is going to be cautious to see, well, on the one hand, growth is slowing. On the other hand, inflation is going up, and they will readily be patient. They may not be preemptive in cutting interest rates. Now, the rest of the world is in a different situation because to the extent that exports to the US are blocked by higher US tariffs, the rest of the world will be floating with more excess capacity. We've seen that China's export performance this year has been remarkably resilient, not because exports to the US have not come down. They've come down by 40% the last 2 months. It's because China has found other markets, in Asia, in the rest of the world. Now, all that excess capacity is going to be disinflationary. So I worry less about inflation outside the US. And I think that is going to give central banks around the world, and especially in Asia, space to keep cutting. It's important to recognize we're already in the midst of pretty long monetary easing cycles, including in India. But is there space in some countries to keep extending monetary policy? It is. Will that be enough is a question mark because around the world post-pandemic, fiscal policy has been constrained. So if you're looking at a sharp external slowing, yes, monetary policy will do its thing. Will that be enough in Asia and the rest of Asia remains an open question.